My first takeaway from the video, Becoming as Ethical as We Think We Are by Hamel, is that ethics isn't in all black and white. Black and white thinking when it comes to ethics is never really valid, since there's always going to be a gray area between um, between every topic that surrounds ethics, like with child labor or with or really with anything, because thinking about it in extremes or all or nothing situations, um, it kind of shifts the focus from obtaining an actual solution where everyone can agree on. And so it's important to always remember that most of the time we're going to end up in the gray area instead of the white area, where is often where we always want to be in, since it's considered correct, but that can't always be the case. And then my second takeaway was that it's easier to say how we would react in a certain situation until we're actually in that situation. So it's important to consider um, our actions and how we choose to um, go about things once they're actually presented to us, even if it's just between. I remember one of the examples that she mentioned was that when we're in the mall and we look at a really nice article of clothing, and we ignore the voice in our head that's like, well, where was this sourced? Did it come from the hands of a child in some foreign country? And if it did, then oh well, like they probably needed the job and they probably made at least some money, which is better than nothing. That is better than having nothing and just living in poverty. And so we often we 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 like to think that we're more ethical than we really are, but it's always our actions that we take in the moment that truly determine our moral code. And then the final takeaway from this video was that anytime that we're in a similar situation like that, whether it be about in a standing up in a public area where we see that something is not as it should be between two other people, and this is very vague, but there's always anything that can happen when you're out in public, especially if it's more so. What I'm thinking is in the matters of sexual assault prevention, because um, most of the time it's easy to get a vibe of how two people are interacting with one another. And so if we see something that seems odd or fishy, we should consider the best way about how we should stand up to them. And also, we need to acknowledge our self-interest whenever we're in a similar situation, because in this situation, it'd be so much easier to just ignore what's happening and look the other way, because we don't want to put ourselves in danger. It's better to, well, I'm saying that this is what most people think, but I'm assuming that most people would think that it's better to just let that person handle it by themselves, and for us to just mind our own business, because our self-interest is looking after ourselves first, and then not really concerning ourselves with the needs of other people. But we must always acknowledge our self-interest, our selfishness, and we need to really we need to unravel it, and with the hopes of acting in the way that we would um think about acting. For example, like it goes back to the second point about how we'd act, about how we would think we would act until we're actually in that situation. And in order for us to act as we would think, we must acknowledge these selfish desires and get rid of them so that we can act accordingly with regards to our moral code. Okay, and then in the second video, the one thing that all great teachers do, the first takeaway from this video, it actually tied into the points that Ranger Rick was talking about whenever he would say great teachers and then blank. And the first one was that they capitalize on teachable moments. And this is important to do because whenever a student may make a mistake, or even we might make a mistake, it's okay to just to kind of not laugh it off, but to acknowledge it and just accept that we're all gonna make mistakes, because nobody is a genius who knows everything. We're human, and it's okay to make mistakes. And more so, it's about also not making students feel embarrassed or ashamed if they were to just blurt out a wrong answer. Whenever we're like, okay, who knows this, and then they say the incorrect answer, but with full confidence, which is something that I've done personally before, and it can be very embarrassing even. But so it's always nice when teachers say something along the lines of, oh, that's not what I was looking for, but I can see why you thought that, and then we're going to talk about what you mentioned up next. It's always nice to feel acknowledged in that way, and to know that you're allowed to not always know everything that you're supposed to know. And so that's very important as an important thing for teachers to do to their students. And then my second takeaway is that, another important point that was mentioned in the video was that teachers need to appreciate the differences of their students. And this is so crucial because every student is going to come from a different background, different socioeconomic level. And of course, we're going to treat everyone the same, because that's just, there's no other way to go about that. But at the same time, we need to be able to observe and know how to treat others who are different, because that's just how it's going to be in the classroom. Some students are going to have strengths, some are going to have weaknesses. There's going to be completely different levels of personality types, and we need to be able to embrace all of them together at the same time every single day, so that nobody feels left out or excluded. And then the third takeaway is that teachers need to be able to relay feedback. And I really like the point that he made here, that Ranger Rick made, whenever he was talking about the stamps that he gives to his students who make below a 90, because those stamps with the funny phrases that are whenever, like with the owl one, with they did an outstanding job. I like that one. And it's important to incorporate some level of recognizing our students' works. Their effort is more so what I'm going for on this one, because not only does it encourage them to keep up the good behavior, but it also makes them feel valued, that what they're doing is not being left unnoticed. So definitely giving them positive feedback and making it a habit is very important to do, because it's so easy to just to pinpoint their areas of improvement and tell them what they could work on. That's so easy. It's something that a lot of teachers do already, but not enough celebrate their accomplishments or give them praise, because praise is so important for a student's self-confidence, not only when it comes to their educational journey, but also with their level of self-esteem. And then the third video, which was called The Significance of Ethics and Ethics Education in Daily Life. My first takeaway was that that everyone has different beliefs, and because of that, everyone is going to have a different understanding of ethics between what is considered right and wrong. And so this can be seen a lot whenever it comes to the areas of abortion care. Everyone is going to have a different opinion about what the right thing should be done. But at the end of the day, we need to be able to have that inward conversation with ourselves and be able to know what we believe in and what we know to be right or wrong in our own through our own way of thinking. So it's important to have that self-awareness and to be able to connect with ourselves so that we can discern what we think is the right thing to do or not with any given situation. And then the second takeaway is that children are everyday ethicists. And this is not really something that surprised me, because every day with my niece, I can tell when she feels wronged. And I imagine that this is also very common in a class. For example, if a teacher were to say, "Oh, hey, you be quiet," when trying to silence a classroom, but then that person that they were talking to wasn't even the one talking, and it was maybe like the group or the person next to them. Now that person feels like they were wronged, because not only were they accused of something that they didn't do, but they were also called out in front of everyone, and it can be very embarrassing at times. And so children are very aware of the way that they're treated, maybe not to the fullest extent to where they are able to compile an explanation about the way that they're feeling, but just enough so that they know that they are feeling something, and that something is important, and teachers need to be able to help them develop that sort of foundation so that they're able to make more informed ethical decisions in the future. And that brings me to my third takeaway, which is that it's hard to work on our ethics because it's often easier to ignore them and just pretend that they aren't there. And in this example, Burroughs, he gave an example about whenever he asked a student if she would let a new classmate into her group of friends, and she said yes, because it would make the new student feel better. And what the girl could have done easily was just say, "No, I'm not gonna let her into my group of friends because she's new. We don't want her. She can figure it out on her by herself." But this shows that even though it's easier to ignore a problem, we display our true beliefs and our true ethical beliefs whenever we put in the effort to actually follow through with them. So that's what I took from that example that he presented during his presentation. And then my personal connection to the videos overall is that in the classroom, I'm going to be forced to make decisions that are essential to the learning and to the safety of students. And anytime that I am forced to that I need to make a choice in these regards, I need to revert back to my moral code and to my ethics, and to acknowledge my selfishness, and to always do what I know is right, even though it's gonna be hard and difficult. But I can always do this either by just having that sort of self-assessment within myself, or by reaching out and um, and getting feedback from a teacher or a friend or anyone. I need to actively um, follow through with my ethical code in order for it to be in the best in order with having my students in mind, because if I didn't, then I would just be with my own with my selfishness, if that makes sense. Like every time that I need to make a decision, I need to always choose what I want to do with the students in mind and not just myself. So that is the personal connection that I got with the videos. Just imagining myself in difficult situations where I might need to contact like the police or principal if I grew concerned with the well-being of anyone, or even if there's just conflict within the classroom within students. I need to be able to decide what to do and why I chose to do that in order to solve any problem. And then for the chapters 15 through 17, in what ways is every classroom in America heterogeneous, regardless of how similar students may look on the surface? I said that even though there are clear similarities, physical ones, like with a student's skin color, their height, their age, or their gender, they all come from different backgrounds. And this means that because they all have different experiences growing up, they're all going to be very unique because of the way that they grew up. And that this needs to be acknowledged. And again, we're always going to treat everyone the same, but we need to remember that not everyone is the same. We're all different. And even though it's a very big contradiction, it's important to be aware of this so that we are able to understand where our students come from and to be able to put ourselves in their shoes whenever it comes to dealing with issues or any sort of conflict that may arise, so that we can not be biased is what I'm going for. And then, in what ways do great teachers model what they expect from their students, and what do ineffective teachers do instead? Um, oh yes, great teachers, they tone into their students' people skills. For example, I remember there was an example where if a student is very if a student often sneezes, but like they only do it like outwardly and not like in their elbow like most people do, um, we shouldn't get mad at them because maybe they just weren't taught to do that. And so we need to be able to have the patience to to sort of develop these people skills, where we need to be remember our conversation we had earlier where we're supposed to use our I forget what this part of the body is called, our shoulder, elbow. We need to use into our elbow, and because and then we explain to them why they need to do that. And then if it happens again and they don't do it in the way that we taught them, we can just continue correcting their behavior, because a lot of the times it's easier, because this is what ineffective teachers do instead of um, um, instead of having the patience with the students, they focus their efforts and their their anger towards the the parenting that they got, and that it explains why they're acting in this way. And since they focus instead of the issue with society and parenting, it kind of it it kind of takes them away from the actual situation, which is being there for the student and helping them see their mistake and helping them correct that mistake. And it also, and when teachers, they kind of just give up and they're like, oh, you do it yourself, you should know this by now, it kind of makes the students feel like they're not good enough because they don't know and they should know. And that's really something um that we can't do, because it's it's so bad to do, to even think about doing. But basically, great teachers, they model what they expect from their students, by showing them and teaching them what it is that they expect, instead of just leaving them off to themselves and hoping that they eventually learn it. And then number 3, where is it? Oh yes, why is it so important for teachers to accurately perceive how they come across to others, particularly to students? And this is important because it demonstrates their level of self-awareness. It's important to see, as a teacher is presenting a lesson, if it's actually being successful, and if it's not being as successful as they thought it might be, they need to be able to have the skills to turn it around. Since often a lot of teachers can just talk and talk for like an hour while giving some sort of presentation, or just teaching about a chapter or a lesson or whatever that it may be, and they're over here standing up and just talking for the entire period. And then you look around as a student and you see that nobody is paying attention. You see that people are having their heads down and they don't care. They're not interested. So it's important for teachers to be able to take notice of this body language, and in order for them to improve their classroom performance and to detect their own strengths and weaknesses, to see what it is that they can improve for the next um, day, or for their next classroom rotation, so that they know that even though they didn't do as good as they could have done, they're prepared the next day to do better. And then in the study cited in the text, what was the difference between schools that exceeded expectations on standardized tests and other schools? Okay, so schools that exceeded their expectations, they displayed a more positive behavior. They said, yes, even though the state testing is very stressful, we cannot allow it to kind of take over our entire curriculum. Because once we do that, then that's the only thing that we're going to be focusing on. But instead, they did like this activity where it was a circle, it was a big circle, and it said what teachers feel is important to teach in the classroom. And then there was a smaller circle within that bigger circle that said what students need to learn to be able to pass the tests. And it was considerably smaller in comparison. And the whole idea behind this is that they need that in order for these schools to get to the bigger circle, they need to tackle the smaller one in order for them to have more autonomy over the way in which they want to present their classes and to teach. And less successful schools, they found it hard to shift their behavior, since they became incredibly worried about their performance, until it eventually became all that they thought about and all that they really shifted their attention to. And so basically, schools that performed better were better to focus on the bigger picture when it comes to state testing. They were like, yes, it's a little inconvenient, but we're going to have to take care of it in order to get where we want to be. So that was the difference between more successful schools and less successful schools. And then, what things influence what is taught in any classroom, and which of these things is the single most important determinant from what happens in the classroom, and why? I kind of had a little, had some difficulty with this question, but basically what I said was that things that influence what is taught in the classroom is the curriculum, and the most important determinant from what happens is the teachers, since they are the ones in control. They're the ones who have the full control over how a lesson is going to get played out and how it's going to play out, as they're the ones who teach it. So that's as much as I got for that one. And yes, my personal connection to the chapter material, I remember it was in relation to question number 3 about how teachers need to be able to be self-aware whenever they're teaching. Because again, I remember so many times in high school, particularly in my US history class, where my teacher, she would just talk and talk in such a monotone voice and so slowly, while just staring at the presentation, not even looking at us the entire time, just reading off of her screen. And it was so boring. And I don't like it when class is boring, because it makes me not want to be there. It makes me want to just be on my phone, or just take a long break to the restroom, so that I don't have to be in that uncomfortable situation where the teacher is so oblivious to the way in which they're teaching, and everyone else feels it too. But what else can be done in that situation other than to just wait for the period to end and hope that time somehow manages to come by faster during those 45 minutes. And so I remember last Thursday I had a presentation for my BESL class, and there was a time where I noticed that as I was talking, most of my classmates were kind of like doing this, like, you know, kind of losing interest in what I was saying, which I understand because it wasn't really that entertaining. So that made me kind of just stop talking and kind of just crack a joke, because I didn't know what else to do. And I could tell the joke that I made was in relation to what I was talking about, which was like the Fifth Amendment. And I tried to make the joke in a way that they would identify with, and it worked. They laughed, and I noticed that their behavior more became more positive. And then by then it gave me the confidence to just keep up that similar way of teaching, when as I was giving my chapter presentation, and it worked. And I got a lot of praise from my teacher after I was done. So yeah, that was what my personal connection to these chapters was that it's very important to know your audience, and to be able to act accordingly, so that there's this sort of mutual ricochet of respect and attention. And well, yes, I think that about covers everything from the videos to the chapters. Yes. Thank you for watching.